Okay, recording has started.
Thank you, Albert. Good morning. Welcome to the April monthly data reporting managers call. My name is Andrea Cannon, a data analyst here at the Office of Special Education Services, and I'm joined by Yolanda Singletary, Evelyn Jackson, and Albert Roman, who are also data analysts here at OSES. Carolyn Bostick, our team lead. She is out on leave today, and our team will be presenting data updates in her absence. Please place any questions that you may have in the chat, and we'll be sure to address your questions. Right now, you are muted for recording purposes. So I'll first start by going through what will be presenting today, the agenda. So can you advance for it, Albert? So the agenda today, agenda one would be Ed Plan SC updates, updates on indicators 7, 11, and 12, indicators 8 and 14, table 5, which is your discipline. We'll mention year-to-year change. I know that that's already been um, submitted, but we'll touch on that. Profiles and determinations, indicators 4A and B, indicators 9 and 10, significant disproportionality. We'll have a few reminders and we'll remind you of resources that you can use to contact us as well. Next, Albert. Agenda one. The Ed Plan SC updates. We just would like to remind you when you go into your spreadsheet, just to make sure that you don't make any changes or alter the spreadsheet. That actually affects the flow of when you submit it to our office, when we have to combine all districts together. When you move or alter the spreadsheets, it's challenging here on our end. So we just make sure that you avoid altering the spreadsheet, and just make sure you have all your data reconciled before you submit to our office. We will have another release update for April, and that run is projected to take place on May 2nd. Prior to that, you want to make sure you have your grade level corrections. Um, all instances of the following grade levels must be corrected in PowerSchool by May 30th. That's XG, Adult Education, AE, PO, P2, P3, OS, UG, NG, and blanks. Next. Okay, agenda item number 2 will be going over some updates / changes for indicators 7, 11, and 12. The deadline for submitting 7, 11, and 12 um, systemic verification data check has passed. However, we anticipate that the results, or they should be into ADT by Friday, May 16th. There is no need for you to return or resubmit any data to our office. What you want to do is make sure all your corrections are made prior to your final submission, which will be in June for indicator 7. Okay, for there's indicator 12. You want to make sure that you include comments or explanation when there is a parental delay or LEA failure. And just to note, LEA failure will be changing that term to LEA delay. So if you see LEA delay, is still the same thing as LEA failure. So you want to make sure that you have a detailed narrative to ensure our staff has a clear understanding of the reason for delay. Um, there is an other option, as you can see on the screen here. Please do not select other. We are anticipating that other option to be removed by final submission. So in the future, you will no longer see that option as it is not um, feasible to use that. And that's therefore we're going to remove that option, the other option. On the C to B transition for indicator 12, um, in the second screenshot, if you probably already noticed, you see like a NA option there. Do not select that option. It's just a reminder. I know we mentioned that in the last meeting, but just as a reminder, do not select that NAA option. And I think that is also projected to be removed and be updated by the final submission. Indicator 7, many of you, I'm sure you have submitted tickets, and I have received emails as well, but previous guidance from our office as well as PCG, we ask that you um, we ask that you check the box to include students who turned 6 during the reporting period but had fewer than 180 days of service. However, we've had to adjust that guidance. And so current guidance is to leave the box unchecked to prevent students from being excluded from the report. This option will be updated to work as expected with the migrated data prior to final submission. So again, the current guidance is to leave that box unchecked. I think we had an issue with if with information migrating from the previous vendor. And so checking that box was causing there to only be students who generated referrals in ed plan. So currently, again, just make sure you leave that box unchecked. Next, Albert. Indicator 11, screenshot, just a reminder that you should deselect the test sample schools. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there may be a case where there were some district options, but you want to make sure you deselect those. And on the indicator 11 60-day timeline, make sure you put the correct school year, as you see in this screenshot, and then the date of October child count of 10/22/24. Back to indicator 12, you want to make sure that you do not place a checkbox by the exclude blank baby net referral dates and report. Please avoid checking that. If the box is checked, um, it will the data will be included in the report, but if the box is not checked, the data will not be included in the report. So you just make sure um, you do not check that box. Okay, and that's it for the updates for 7, 11, and 12. And I will turn it over to Evelyn Jackson for indicators 8 and 14.
Hey, good morning, everyone. As far as indicators 8 and 14, there is no new updates. We're still tweaking that information and trying to collaborate with the previous vendors and our current new vendor to make sure that we have all the everything together and all the information we need. So at this point, there are no new updates for indicators 8 and 14. For March 20, that's the same thing. The demographics and data and everything will still remain the same. There's no Ed Plan SC submissions required for parent involvement for indicator 8 and 14 post-secondary outcomes. We eliminated the March 28th, 25 submission deadline. So this is just the previous information that we had in our last meeting. But for now, there are no new updates. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is my piece right here. I'm talking about discipline data report, and this is Albert Roman. And let me advance the slide. Okay, so for your incident management mid-year review, we're currently waiting on a completed 135-day report from the Office of Research and Data Analysis so that we can run the numbers for Table 5. Once we do, we will send out the report to the districts to check and make any corrections in PowerSchool before the final 180-day report is ran. And then after that, districts will have another chance to make any corrections in PowerSchool before the final submission deadline in June. So we are still currently awaiting on that. Year-to-year changes. Okay. So the year-to-year change explanations were due on April 18th, and this is just touching on what was supposed to be in that explanation box, but there is no right or wrong answer for that. Just an explanation of what led to the change in your data. For speech language, the teachers are added to section A and related services is added to section C. And explanations were only required if a change of 50 points or 30% had occurred between the years. Now, changes in discipline data may have occurred due to how OSES is now deriving that data from your incident management reports, which comes from ORDA, which we just spoke about earlier. If that occurred with your district, you can just state in that explanation field, change in state acquisition or something to that effect, so that we can know that that is what occurred. But we are aware that that may have occurred with certain districts due to how that data was now being acquired directly from that incident management report. All right, profiles and determinations. So there were some known issues discovered with the original copies of the draft profiles and determinations, which have been corrected. So I know that they initially went out earlier this month. The corrected versions were placed in ADT yesterday. So please review the newest version when you're inquiring about any corrections, but they have been placed in ADT now. You'll have until mid-May to inquire about those corrections. And just as a reminder, the data profiles measure how the district compares to the annual performance report and the state performance plan, the SPP APR. The final copies will be uploaded to the website on June 2nd, and it can be accessed using that link. We are trying to move towards an semi-interactive dashboard that you'll be able to look at your data that way. We still will have your reports, whether it's Excel version or PDF version, that we'll be sending out to you via ADT. But that will be available June 2nd. The final version of your profile and determinations will be available on the website June 2nd. So you should have received two versions of the profiles and determinations, and one is a draft of what will be reported this year for FY23, and the other is the proposed version with new performance factors for next year, and that is using the FY23 as sample data. So when you're looking at the proposed, it's going to have this year's data, but for next year, of course, it'll be FY24 data. It is just to give you an example of what the new performance factors are going to look like. And the only changes on the proposals is for performance factor 7, which is now going to be split into performance factor 7 and 8. Okay, so the new performance factor 7 is going to be early childhood least restrictive environment, which comes from child count, and it'll be I guess segregated or separated by this point value, this new point value. So it'll be a 0 to 1.5 value instead of a 0 to 3 point value. And then the new performance factor 8 is going to be early childhood outcome summary, and that is derived from indicator 7. So you'll be able to refer to indicator 7 to see how that was calculated, but that is also on a 0 to 1.5 scale. So there shouldn't be a difference in how, or in your total points or how it's calculated, since before it was just all a 0 to 3 point scale, but now it's divided this way. And I won't read out the actual point values here, but you can refer to this on your own. But that will be the new proposed performance factors 7 and 8 coming next year. All right, that's it for my piece. I think this is, I'll pass it on to Yolanda now.
Good morning. I will be speaking to you about the indicator 4, 9, 10, the discipline, 4A and B is the discipline significant discrepancy. The purpose of indicator 4 is to fulfill the federal equity requirements to evaluate the extent to which students with disabilities in each race, ethnic group disproportionately received long-term disciplinary removals. And the additional action will be required if a district exceeds the 2.5 threshold. The data sources for indicator 4 are for school year 2022-23, table 1 child count and table 5 discipline. Indicators 4A and 4B, rates of suspension and expulsion, is taken from table 5. Indicator 4A is the percent of districts that have a significant discrepancy in the rate of suspensions and expulsions greater than 10 days in a school year for which a child with an IEP is placed. In indicator 4, it is the percent of districts that have significant discrepancy as defined by the state by race or ethnicity in the rate of suspension and expulsions of greater than 10 days in a school year for children with IEPs. And you see the 7 race ethnicity groups that are included in the report. Indicator for a target for 2024 is 0.0317, and the LEA's data results should be less than or equal to the state's target. The methodology for the 4A rate ratio is a comparison of the district rates with the state rates, and it's for students with disabilities with out-of-school suspensions and expulsions greater than 10 days in a district to the proportion of the students with disabilities for out-of-school suspensions and expulsions greater than 10 days in the state. The district rate will be included in the numerator portion of the equation, and the state rates or numbers will be included in the bottom portion, and I'll consider the denominator portion of the equation. And for the 4A methodology, there is no subgroup size minimum. Here's an example of an equation with some data that you can use to, if you want to calculate how your district's data for the year is. Here we have the state data and LEA number 2 that is included in this equation. At the top, the number of students with disabilities with out-of-school suspensions and expulsions greater than 10 days. You'll see that that's the district information on the top portion. LEA 2 had a total of 31 students, and the number of students with disabilities in the district is 2,911, which is taken from the child count. And then we'll also include the number of students with disabilities with OSS and expulsions greater than 10 days for the state. It was a total of 416 students, and the number of students in the state with disabilities is a total of 106,314. resulting in a rate ratio of 2.72. For indicator 4B, the target for 2024 is 0. This is a compliance indicator, and it should be equal to the Office of Special Programs, OSEP, predefined state target of 0%. Indicator 4 methodology rate ratio. It compares the rate of students with disabilities with OSS expulsions greater than 10 days in a racial ethnic group in a district to the rate of students with OSS expulsions greater than 10 days in the state. As before, the top portion of the equation will contain the district's data, and the bottom portion will contain the state's data. For indicator B, there is a minimum N size of 10. The N size is the denominator in the equation. And here you have an example that you can use to refer back to when you want to check your rate ratio in your district. The number of students with disability in a racial ethnic group with OSS and expulsions greater than 10 days in the district. In this example, it's 21. We're looking at LEA number 2. And the number of students with disabilities in the racial ethnic group in the district is 1,215, taken from the child count. And we're looking at Black or African American students in this example. And then you have the state's information for the OSS and expulsions of 416 and the total child count of 106,314, given a rate ratio of 4.42%. Indicators 9 and 10 is the disproportionate identification and representation. Indicator 9 and 10, disproportionate representation purpose is to fulfill the federal equity requirements of evaluating the extent to which students with disabilities in each racial ethnic group are disproportionately identified as a student with a disability or students with specific disabilities. Additional action will be required if a district exceeds the threshold of 2.5. The data sources for the 2023-24 school year is Table 1 child count, student enrollment for the 45th day, and students ages 5 in kindergarten through age 21. The indicator 9, disproportionate representation, you want to ask, is there disproportionate representation of a racial or ethnic group due to inappropriate identification of the students with disabilities? And it once again will affect the 7 race ethnic groups. Indicator 10 is the disproportionate representation specific disability categories. And the 6 disability categories are listed for your convenience. Indicators 9 and 10 are compliance indicators, and it should be equal to the Office of Special Education Programs predefined target of 0. And how to determine the risk. First, you want to select an race ethnic group and a category of analysis. You want to determine which risk ratio and data are appropriate for analyzing the specific disproportionality. You'll check the numerator risk. Are both the minimum cell size 10 and N size 30 met? If the answer is no, you will stop the analysis. No risk ratio will be calculated for this racial ethnic group in this category. If the answer is yes, you will check the denominator risk. Are both the minimum cell size 10 and N size 30 met? If the answer is no, you will calculate an alternate risk ratio. If the answer is yes, you will calculate a risk ratio. All right, and the disproportionate representation methodology for the risk ratio, an example is given here. Here you will have the risk of students in a racial ethnic group for identification as a student with a disability against the risk of all other students for identification as a student with disability. You want to consider the minimum cell size of 10 in the numerator. So you will look at a particular race ethnic group and compare it to the number of students in a racial ethnic group enrolled. Your minimum N size will be your denominator, which should be 30 or more. If the cell size is the numerator and the N size is the denominator. And next, we'll have an example of how to calculate your risk ratio. And for this example, we'll be using Hispanic and Latino within a district for indicator 9. Here you have 518 LEA child count for the race ethnicity for Hispanic and Latino. 685 is the child count for all other race ethnicities. The enrollment in the LEA for the Hispanic Latino is 4,317, and the LEA enrollment of all other race ethnicities is 11,285. And in this slide, you will see where we populate the numbers. In A1, it is the LEA's child count for the Hispanic Latino students against the enrollment for the Hispanic and Latino students. And then in the denominator, A2 is the child count of all other race ethnicities in that LEA. And then B2 is the LEA enrollment of all other race ethnicities. And in this district, the Latino children are 1.9 times as likely to be identified as a student with an IEP compared to students in this district who are not Hispanic and Latino. The disproportionate representation methodology for an alternate risk ratio example is the risk of students in a racial ethnic group for identification as a student with disability against the risk of all other students who are identified as a student with a disability. The top portion of the equation will be the district data, and the bottom portion will contain the state data. And you will be comparing the racial ethnic group against the students enrolled in that racial ethnic group against the state's number of students of all other racial ethnic groups divided by the number of students of all other racial ethnic groups enrolled. And once again, we have an example that can be used to compare your state's data if you would like to check how we determine your alternate risk ratio if one is used for a child. Again, it includes the LEA's child count of a race ethnicity, in this example of Hispanic, Latino children with autism. And you're going to compare it against the state's enrollment data and child count data for the students with autism against the entire state's enrollment. And in the next slide, you will see where these numbers are populated in the equation. And in this example, you'll see that the minimum cell size of 10 is not met, and therefore an alternate risk ratio will be calculated. And those numbers that were on the previous slide have been populated in the equation, and it was determined that the risk ratio is 2.51, and therefore Hispanic and Latino children are 2.51 times likely to be identified as a student with autism compared to students in the state who are not Hispanic and Latino. Significant disproportionality, discipline identification, and placement. Significant disproportionality refers to the overrepresentation or underrepresentation of a specific racial or ethnic group in certain educational categories, such as the identification of students with disabilities or placements in an educational setting, in a particular educational setting, or disciplinary actions like suspensions or expulsions. Under the IDEA, significant disproportionality is identified when the disparities are noticeably different from what you would be expected based on the demographics and overall student population. The rate for discipline is 3.0, and the rate for identification and placement is 4.0. The cell size is 10, which is the minimum cell size set by the state for the number of children experiencing a particular outcome, such as children with disabilities or children with other health impairments. The N size is 30, and that's set by the state for the number of children enrolled in an LEA with respect to an identification, or of children with disabilities enrolled in an LEA with respect to placement and discipline, to be used as the denominator when calculating either the risk for a particular race or ethnic group or the risk for children in all other racial or ethnic groups. The identification and placement threshold is, if it's greater than 4.0, is calculated out to 1 decimal point. The discipline threshold greater than and equal to 3.0 calculated out to 1 decimal point, and multi-year, which is the most 3-year data set to be used annually. Reasonable progress will be used for identification and placement, but not for discipline. Reasonable progress for identification and placement is a 0.1% reduction for 3 consecutive years. Here is a table that shows you what, where, and what data is being used for those 3 years. For identification, it is the child count for the specific years. For placement, it is ages 5 through 21. That's 5 in kindergarten. And for the discipline, it's ages 3 through 21, and it includes the child count and disciplinary removals, which is taken from Table 5. New this year is the discipline reasonable progress. The differentiated monitoring system recommended that South Carolina implement flexible criteria for discipline, and South Carolina will be implementing a universal threshold of 4.0, allowing for a 0.5 decrease in discipline metrics and a 10% decrease in identification and placement metrics over 2 consecutive years. Reasonable progress is a way for an exemption based on progress towards improvement. For discipline, for 2021 through for the 2021-22 year, the rate was 5.0, and South Carolina allows for the gradual reduction of 0.5% for each year. For 22-23, it was 4.5, and for 23-24, it will be 4.0. For the identification and placement, 21-22 school year was 4.5, and here you will see the reduction of 0.1%. For 22-23, it was 4.3, and for 23-24, it will be 4.2. Now I'll turn it over to Andrea for reminders and resources.
Okay, before we go into the reminders and resources, I think there was a question or someone missed, and let me go back and pull that question. I think they missed a target or something that you mentioned, Yolanda. Let me go back and grab that question so we can get that addressed.
Yes, it was from Sheila Ayers, the 4A target for 2024 percentage. She wanted to know what that was.
Can we go back to that slide?
Sure, give me a second.
Okay, so let's see, go forward 1 or 2 to the target. Okay, no, go back.
Okay.
One more. It had the target on it, didn't it? Okay. 4A target is 0.0317. And then if you could go to 4B, if the target should be in there. And these, you will be getting a copy of the slides. 4B is 0. And you will have that information at your fingertips.
Yes, we'll have the copy of the slides and the recording posted on the website soon, so you can refer back to that information if you need to.
Okay. I think I captured all the questions. If not, Albert, can you unmute to have them unmuted to
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead and
ask any questions?
sure, give me one moment.
And while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and just go through the reminders. Just a reminder that our monthly meetings are held the 4th Tuesdays at 10 o'clock a.m. Our next one will be May 22nd. And the systemic verification check, that has closed. And we plan to, as we stated early in the presentation, we plan to have the results to you back in May. Let's see, so so are they unmuted yet?
Yes,
Albert?
participants are unmuted now, so you can take yourself off mute if you have any additional questions.
Or if I missed a question, because I know I answered some in the chat, but if your question was not answered, please, you may now unmute to ask your question.
This is Anna Gibson in the school district of Oconee County. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I have a question about the resources that you guys have provided us. Um, I have a copy of an indicator technical assistance guide draft that kind of goes through everything that you went through today about the data source for the different indicators, how it's calculated, an example provided, all of that kind of stuff. I was wondering if there has been a finalized copy of that provided.
Okay, I think you're speaking about the indicator connection guide.
The title of it is Indicator Technical Assistance Guide.
Yes. That has not been finalized. I'll have made it. I did see that question. I'm sorry,
No,
because I
you're
have
fine.
a note right here to follow up. Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure that's updated and then we'll get that out to all districts.
Okay. And then my other question is, I also have a copy of an indicators and projected 6-year targets document. It's dated 7/13/2022. And I was wondering, is this still applicable?
I will consult with Carolyn on that one. And when we send out the recording, we'll address that 6-year target document. If there's an update, if there should be an dated copy for that to be released, we'll include that in the email with the link to the this presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a
So,
question in the chat from Karen Lex 3. She's stating, she's question on the correction of grades on the slides that were at the very beginning. The SSI school gives the grade of 9, and this equates to XG and Ed Plan. Do you want us to give a grade to BabyNet children that have not been identified as SPED as yet? Would the grade be PK3? Did you want to take yourself off of mute, Karen, so you can elaborate?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. The SSI school, whenever you enroll a child, it gives them the grade of -9 automatically. Now we can go in and change that, give them a grade of PK3, but we have not been doing it until the child has been identified as special ed and either placed in a 3-year-old early childhood program, which we call PK3, or if they are a community child that comes in for speech services only, we still give them a PK3 grade because that's the lowest that we have. So, and that would be a -2 in Power School, actually. So that's my question. Do you want us to give BabyNet children and Child Find children who have not been tested and not been identified as yet the grade, overrate the -9 and give them a -2, which would be a PK3?
Yolanda, I don't know if you know the answers to this question, but I'm leaning toward, and I'm not going to give you a solid answer since I don't know, but I'll get back with you on the answer. But if they have not been identified, and they're not enrolled, I mean, there is
Right.
no grade assignment to give them, but I'll follow up and we'll also have that answer to that question for you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just a reminder, this is the link to our monthly meetings, again, for Thursdays at 10 o'clock. The meetings are recorded and posted to our website, so feel free to share with any staff members that would need to have knowledge of what we are covering. And the link again is on Teams, and it will also be located in this PowerPoint that we will share out to you soon. So also resources, as just a reminder that we have resources on the Google Drive as well, the Google Drive folder. So if you'd like to grab some resources from that, from the Google Drive, you're welcome to do that. And just also remember that you can also pull items from our website, including the previous recordings that we've had for the data manager meeting. The OSES contacts me, Andrea Cannon, acannon@ed.sc.gov. You see the telephone number displayed there, Evelyn Jackson. And let me go back. I'm 7, 11, and 12. Indicator 7, 11, and 12. Child count, that's Yolanda Singletary. She's table 1 and 3, table 4. But Evelyn Jackson's indicators 8, 14, and ESY. Albert, table 2 and table 8. And I think I'm missing one, Albert. Am I?
Table 5 is discipline, which I work with Yolanda, and that's
You
the
with
next
Yolanda?
item.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I see that. I'm sorry. And then, as he stated, table 5 discipline. That's Yolanda and Albert Roman. And then SIGDIS Pro, which would be Carolyn, our team lead, as well as year-to-year change. Any questions that you may have that may have been not addressed here, you need to ask. You can always send email to our special education email box at specialeducationservices@ed.sc.gov. If there are no more questions, we appreciate your attendance and we appreciate all that you do for these students here in South Carolina. Have a great day.